say what's on my mind.
Who you know got it like that? Who you know really make rappers get laughed?
Welcome to another interview of The Strong Blood. We have a very special guest. Joseph Hines is with us today, the owner of Affluent brand. He worked with the NFL, NBA, Mercedes-Benz, and a lot more companies. Absolutely killing it. Joseph, how you doing today?
My man, I'm doing great, brother. How are you?
Good, man. Not too bad at all. Not too bad at all. I so I texted you the night before, asked if you're gonna wear a suit, man, because I saw you on the Roommates. You brought a suit on. I was like, damn, you know what? Like, let me make sure I'm coming up fresh. And dude, I haven't had any suits like tailored for me in a while, and I grew like a lot, like in size.
Mhm.
So I maybe needed to solicit your services after this interview, man. And
Yeah, man. No,
get
no
right.
worries. And I know you've been in the gym, man. So that's what happens. Even for myself, sometimes, I've been gaining a little bit of weight myself, and I'm like, man, okay, it might be time to let some of these out. So
Yeah.
I get it, man.
Most definitely, most definitely. Speaking of the gym, man. So while I was doing research on you, I really connected that me and you are really both in the same industry. Okay. Our goal is to help people look better, right? You
Right.
help people look better in the sense of, hey man, here's your fashion. This is what's going to fit you right.
Mhm.
Let's get it together. I'm in the industry of, hey man, you want to lose weight, gain weight, let's make it happen so that you feel better, you look better about yourself, right? So
Yeah.
how do you feel like the two things have impacted you in developing your brand and overall just who you are as your person?
Well, to be honest, when it comes to both fashion and fitness, I think both are very congruent,
Mhm.
right? Because at the end of the day, you can have a tailored suit, but if your body isn't tailored, and if it isn't streamlined, it's never going to look as good. So I think both of those, spaces always have a lot of congruency because, again, if you really want to maximize your aesthetic, it's not enough just to be, the guy who dresses well. You also want to make sure that you're fit. And granted, there's different fitness levels amongst people,
Mhm.
but getting to a place that's healthy, especially being in America where a lot of people are obese, I don't think is very congruent with you also wanting to get into a space to where you're tailored and you're wearing suits. So I think both of them always play really, really well with each other. And I think both of them have a really big impact. When I first started this journey, one thing that really kind of tripped me out when I was doing my research is that the brain processes images 60,000 times faster than it does words. And 60% of a person's first impression is based on what they physically see. So what encompasses what a person sees, right? Not only is it, how you're groomed, but it's how you dress and also, your fitness, how you look, how your body is shaped. So I think, especially as men, when you're able to master those things, you can become, like a master of perception, if you will. And you're really able to maximize people's responses and also get the most out of, your environment when you're interacting with it. Because at the end of the day, whether you don't want to play the perception game or not, you're kind of forced into it, because 90% of communication, also, this is another stat I was reading about the other day, is visual. So it's learning, these things that instinctually are already hardwired into us and, learning how to maximize and work with them.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And I think that was fire what you said because I've been thinking about this a lot as well too recently, right? Like the power of perception, the
Mhm.
power of presentation, both of the things go hand in hand with each other. So do you feel like that when somebody who isn't necessarily giving off the best presentation in terms of how they look, the dressed, or maybe overweight, whatever it may be, how much of a difference does that make for somebody that is dressed well, that is in shape and trying to level up or I guess get their foot into the doors of
Yeah.
certain opportunities, if that makes sense.
Well, well, again, I think it makes a huge difference. Kind of, like we were talking about earlier, 60% of a person's first impression is based on what they physically see before you even open your mouth, right? So if you're already starting with a leg behind, imagine how much harder you have to now work to get on somebody's good side or for them to be able to even relate to what you're saying because in their mind, they've already made some decisions. Because and that's the thing I think that has to be talked about more is, there's physical conversation that can be heard and then there's nonverbal conversation. And you want to make sure that that nonverbal conversation that you can hear, you're having the right type of dialogue. And that happens with how you present yourself, how you dress, how you're groomed. I mean, even if you're looking at it from a psychological perspective, there's this thing called the halo effect. And pretty much what the halo effect says is, you know, the more somebody perceives you as somebody who's, let's say, an expert or somebody who, you know, is in a good light, the easier it is for them to continue to stack on these good associations with you. But if they're not already perceiving you in a good light, it's kind of hard for you to then work against that, to be perceived as somebody who's credible. Now, you know, I think the things for guys is, and I was having this conversation with one of my business friends, we get into this space to where we focus so much on the performance piece that we think that the perception piece doesn't matter. And there are some cases where as a man, you can perform so well that it gets to the point to where you don't have to care about how you look, right? But my thing is, why not be the full package? You know what I mean? Michael Jordan wasn't Michael Jordan just because he was athletic. No, he worked on his, you know, post-up game. He worked on his mid-range game. He worked on being able to shoot with his back against the basket. You know, he expanded his game. He didn't get comfortable just with doing one thing very, very well. And I think as guys, we kind of have that that mindset sometimes to where, you know, we get to this space to where we perform so well that we're like, I can wear whatever I want. Not realizing that if you can match the aptitude with the aesthetic, man, that's when you get real power. That's when you become a superstar, right? Because that, you know, when you look at people like Beyonce, Drake, Cristiano Ronaldo, you know, part of the reason their brand and image is so big is because not only do they have the aptitude, but they've matched it with the aesthetic. And when you're able to combine both of those things together, I think you can get something really, really special.
Yeah, I think that you reach a whole different level that is like very uh applaudable to a lot of people, you know what I'm saying? Because you're able to combine two things that is very hard to do and make it look nice, you know what I'm saying? So I definitely agree with that. So I wanted to ask you, man, because I saw in the interview you said that when you had plans to make it to the league playing basketball,
Yeah.
and that kind of got halted when you found out that you had nerve damage in one of your arms, right? So how did that moment right there impact you to get to where you're at now? Were you kind of lost and like you didn't know where to go? You just kind of knew what you wanted to do right after that, and you were able to take it from there.
No, man. I mean, it impacted me a lot, you know. So basically, that was junior year. That was the summer of my junior year because I broke my arm twice in the same year. And the second time I broke it, you know, you're right. Bone came out of my arm. I had nerve damage, and I remember sitting down. And I was just like, man, what am I gonna do? You know, I ended up playing the rest of my senior season. I didn't tell anybody I didn't have any feeling in my left arm. But you know, you finish that season and you know the looks that I was getting, you know, you start looking at D3, NIA, D2. I mean, it wasn't that attractive for me for where I was trying to go. And I remember literally going in the gym one day and you know, I was looking to practice because I always used to practice. We had block schedule, and I always used to practice on, you know, my time off before my next class. And I remember picking up the ball and it just felt like work. It was the first time ever that I had went in the gym, wanted to practice, and it just didn't feel fun. And at that moment I knew that I had to make a different adjustment because it just didn't feel right. And it was hard, man, because I think especially as basketball players and athletes, you get locked into associating yourself with one thing for so long, you have no idea what your other skill sets or other avenues or passions are. And you know, it took a while, man, because now what happens is I have all this energy that I'm wanting to filter towards somewhere, but I don't know where to place it. And it's scary. You know, a lot of times I think what keeps people from finding out what they love, or, you know, what they want to do is asking themselves why or what is it. And part of that is because the fear of not knowing the answer. So a lot of times you'll push that question off, you know, not asking yourself what you want to do because you're afraid that you won't get the answer. But what I found is the more I asked myself, even though I didn't know, I started getting closer and closer to things that were the answer. And you know, that's what led me to, you know, freshman year. Really, before freshman year, I was shadowing or going to and doing school visits. And I was visiting Georgia Southern, and I'll never forget it. Had a guy by the name of Adam Hazlett. He came up to me and he said, "Hey, you know, we're having a program called Pathways to Success. It's for incoming African-American males. We're only selecting 30 out of this freshman class. Would you be interested in potentially, joining? I said, sure. So, I went in, I did the interview, and, was blessed because a month later I got a call back and they said, hey, you're accepted, come up. So, I come up about a week before, school starts, and they pair us with mentors. And the mentors at the time were guys, it was either like their senior year in college or they were working on their masters or PhDs, et cetera. And it was the first time that I saw guys that looked like me, that dressed up. Even more so than that, I just remember the response, right? And I kind of talked about this a little bit on the roommates, but there was one time in particular, we're all in the dining commons and I see about 6 or 7 of them walk in. And it was like time stopped, right? Like the lunch lady stopped serving chicken, people start, eating their mashed potatoes. And I remember sitting there and I was like, man, what caused that response? And I just became really fascinated about how these guys were able to walk in this environment, have that environment interact with them in such a way that like everybody stopped doing what they were doing. And that's kind of what got me into menswear, man. And again, it was hard because I continued to have to ask myself what it is that I wanted to do, but it was in me asking and being okay with not knowing the answer that led me to finding a solution and where I'm at now. And I'm always continuing to ask myself, those answers, because as humans, we evolve. And we have multiple gifts, we have multiple talents, and it's continuing to put ourselves in vehicles that allow for us to showcase those talents, those abilities, those gifts.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's so powerful that you said that, because I kind of went through the same thing as well too, where
Mhm.
I got into college after playing sports my whole life. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I found myself just like partying and whatever it may be, just to kind of like release that energy. And, I had to just sit down in that darkness really and just say, look,
Mhm.
I don't want to keep going down this path, partying, not really doing anything of substance. And, then I got into lifting and fitness and all that
Yeah.
stuff. So I think that there's a lot of power that comes from that darkness. And I'm not sure if you know him, but David Goggins talks about this a lot as well too,
Yeah.
is don't be afraid to dive into that darkness, to ask yourself those uncomfortable questions and look yourself in that mirror and be like, oh, you know what? This is fucked up about you. We got to fix this. You're not doing this. We need to do that. You see what I'm saying? But, just as that was important for me, I noticed that we have this tool, we have this phone, and this phone is pretty much like a computer in our pockets.
Mhm.
And that I was able to do a lot more with that in terms of branding, starting a business. So how do you feel like having such a powerful tool in your pocket and building a brand for yourself and a successful company for yourself is catapulting you into the right direction where you want to go?
Well, so one thing I always tell people is branding will put you in rooms that marketing can't pay for. And what I mean by that is, this device cuts out the middleman and it allows you to scale yourself to thousands, millions, billions of people in the world, right? And when you have a device like that, man, especially when you start branding, it puts yourself in a situation to where, man, to give you a perfect example, I was in Indiana for the Party Girl. I'm in Indiana, I'm from Atlanta, but I'm in Indiana and people are recognizing me in Indiana from my Instagram, right? Or the other day I had a suit appointment. I asked the guy, I said, hey man, how did you hear about me? He said, well, actually, man, my friend sent me your Instagram. And I was like, after I saw it, I got to get connected with you. That's the power of social media. That's the power of branding yourself, man. And, granted, you can market people to death, but when you really start building a brand, people want to share it. Jesus only started with 12 apostles.
Mm,
He only needed 12 and they spread the message. And that's kind of how I look at it with branding is when you brand yourself, you create people who are fans, people who are apostles of what you do, and they want to share what you do because they connect with it. It's more so than just what you're doing as much, and it's even more sometimes you. They connect with you on a personal level to where they're like, man, this guy's really cool. I want to actually share it. Because that's the thing with social media is, you're constantly getting these hits of dopamine, you're constantly moving on to the next thing. But if you could get somebody to stop, connect with what you're doing and share it with somebody, man, that's big because it's very hard for you to stop that flow because there's so much information. So if you can find a way to cut through the noise and have something that sticks in a world where it's hundreds, thousands, millions of new pieces of content that are being put out a day, and it's like McDonald's, right? It's fast food. Uh, that is, I think the real power, man.
Mhm. Most definitely, because there's, like you were saying, there's a lot of noise out there on social media. So being able to find something, especially your own lane, and being able to
Mhm.
do that yourself, like that's going to cause you to stick out and have people notice you, not only in the moment, but think about you when they're walking their dog, when they're going to
Right.
the gym, when they're whatever it may be. So you started this brand called Affluent. Where did the inspiration from, the brand name Affluent? Where did you get that from?
Well, really, I think just what it means, right? Because if you're looking at affluent, and you're just looking at the definition, the overall meaning, if you were to sum it up, is abundance, right? If you're an affluent individual, really to operate as an affluent individual, that means you have a certain amount of abundance, whether it's monetarily, right? Whether it's from your knowledge base, but you're operating in a space of abundance. And that's kind of what I've always believed in. When it comes to being a full man or congruent man, it's more than just the image, right? I've always preached to guys like, yes, you want to have your image, but you also want to have the aptitude with the aesthetic, right? You want to have the character with it. You want to have the knowledge base with it. You want to have the funds that go with it. And to me, when I look at an individual that's affluent, an affluent individual has those things, right? They have the position, they generally have the image, they have the taste level, they have all of these things, and it's the sum of these things that make them an affluent individual. That's kind of where the inspiration came from, and it's wanting to kind of spread that idea, spread my knowledge, and be able to duplicate that in my clients.
Yeah. So, dude, I see that you're so you have this successful, suit tailoring company, but it doesn't seem like it's just that you try to hone in on it and bring to people's eyes that they only need to have. It's like having this whole character, having this whole developed package. And it's kind of what, the roommates talk about as well too, and kind of what I like to instill into my audience as well. So how do you feel like building your business and the quality of character and person go hand in hand with each other?
Well, so yeah, I'm in a service business, right? And whenever you're in any type of service industry, service business, referrals are the lifeblood of your business. If people don't like you, they're not going to refer you. And it's very important to be high character because when you're high character, the referrals, all of those things take care of themselves if you do business the right way, if you try to provide maximum value to every client that you interact with. Those are the symptoms of being high character, being somebody who has high morals, who operates with high integrity. The symptoms of that are referrals and people wanting to do more business with you. So I think it goes very much hand in hand because if you don't operate from a place of integrity, from a place of character, if I were to put a client in a piece that I don't necessarily believe in, or I don't think looks that great, or I let him go out and I knew I could have tailored it a little bit more this way, tailored a little bit more that way, that's when your business begins to decline because you start taking those shortcuts that don't allow for yourself to really put that maximum value into your client and they end up feeling that, right? And so the thing with me is I try to give my clients the best experience possible. Even the things that I can't necessarily provide to them personally, I always try to give recommendations. So when guys come to me, it becomes a full suite of services. So not only am I going to give you, the custom suit, the custom shirt, but I'm going to give you recommendations on where to get your tie. I'm going to give you recommendations on where to get your shoe, where to get your pockets wear, how to wear it, why to wear it, because I also want to educate you. My job is for you actually not to need me as much,
Mm.
right? So instead of you having to call me and say, hey, Joe, should I wear this with this? You'll be able to say, oh, yeah, I remember when Joe taught me that, this is a dry fabric and dry fabrics you want to pair with other dry fabrics. So I don't even need to call me. I know exactly what to do.
Yeah.
That's kind of my idea of doing business and why it's so important to kind of have those things coexist with each other.
I think that's what makes just average entrepreneurs from great entrepreneurs is that, okay, look, I can give you what I can give you just to like keep you here in the moment and eventually have you coming back to me. But how can I give you what I can give you here in this moment and teach you the proper things that you need to know in order to keep this going longevity, keep this going on for a long time, you know? So you have what you're doing is a strong skill set, right? Tailoring, suiting people. How long do you feel like it took you to develop that skill set?
Oh man. So I mean, I've been in the space now 9 years, 8 years, 9 years. So I mean, it's been a process, man. I mean, even now, I still learn every day. And I'm still learning things today. So it's not something that stops. You know, Malcolm Gladwell, I think he talks about his 10,000 hours. So, you know, every day I'm still learning. But I think when I really started saying to myself, man, I'm pretty good at this is maybe 2.5, 3 years in.
Mm,
You know, I really started seeing that, oh, okay, cool. People really are like gravitating towards what I'm doing. Okay, wow, people really are kind of liking the way I'm styling things together, you know. And then 6 years in, that's when I'm like, man, I think I could really, you know, maybe live off this full time. I could really like monetize this to where I don't necessarily have to work. So it's a process. It's not something that happens overnight. And I think that's really important for people to know is, you know, I started this journey freshman, sophomore year of college. So this isn't something that was overnight, and it's something that's still being built. So I think there's a patience element that you need to have in entrepreneurship. And I know that it's hard because sometimes you have, you know, this fast entrepreneurship or people who get in the right, you know, the right lane and they blow up very quick. But, you know, you have to respect your journey and your lane. And the analogy I always give is, you know, if you're on the highway and you're driving a car, if you were to look in the left lane and continue looking in the left lane and don't put your eyes back on the road, what's going to eventually happen?
it's a done
You're going
deal.
to crash.
Yep.
Now, it's okay to look in the left lane if you're looking to maybe merge, or to look in the other lane if you're looking to admire the vehicle that somebody else is in to give you motivation to get to your destination. That's okay to look for a second. But if you never put your eyes back on your lane or your road, and you're never going to get to your destination, you're going to end up crashing out. So that's kind of the mindset that I like to instill in guys is it's okay to admire, you know, but never admire to the point to where it becomes jealousy or you're looking to actually take your eyes off the road or your own path.
Mhm.
And that's the biggest thing that I think guys have to focus in on now is knowing the difference.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. And you know, the fact that you said about the process, man, and how the first 2 to 3 years you got into it, you're like, okay, I'm actually decent at this. And then after year 6, that's when you started making money from it, you know, and this is a long process that I feel like a lot of people don't understand because you get to see the highlight reels on Instagram, on YouTube, on all these other
Mhm.
platforms that just give you that constant and quick dopamine rush of cars, women, all this other stuff that, you know,
Mhm.
alludes to, okay, what this came
Right.
overnight. You see what I'm saying? So let's rewind a little bit, and I want to talk a little bit more about kind of your come up with everything. So
Okay.
after high school, you badge on the organization Pathway to Success, and that's when you kind of get the first taste of wearing suits, tailoring, custom, and all that, right?
Yeah, man. So really, essentially, what happened is, you know, I really started getting big into the space. I really started, you know, honing in on wanting to wear suits. And my sophomore year, I ended up going to a luxury retailer. And I went inside this retailer, and I'm looking around, and I see this guy is literally the only black guy that's in there. I go up to him and I say, "Hey, man, you know, I know you don't know me from a can of paint, but I'm really interested in getting into the space. Would you mind mentoring?"
Mhm.
And he said yes. And that was the start of me really kind of honing in on the space. And I remember I would always bug him a lot, you know, and shout out to Jason Locust. But, you know, anytime there was an event, anytime there was a party, you know, I would ask him if I could come, and he would invite me out. And I remember it just started with me going to events and him kind of teaching me little subtleties about menswear, or giving me, you know, certain films to watch. Then that led into me, you know, getting magazines like The Rake and kind of doing my own research. And then, you know, actually getting a job at the same luxury retailer that I met him at. And, you know, one of the things I say, you know, fashion, style, it's a contact sport, which means you have to engage in it, you have to practice it. So I just started making this, commitment in my head to every day I was going to dress up. So what that did for me, which was really impactful, is it taught me how to style myself in different environments, how to style myself when I'm in class to where it doesn't look too stiff when I'm still dressed up, how to style myself at, the club, right? How to style myself at the house party, right? And what I started learning is different aesthetics for different environments and how those environments play or interact with the clothing that you have on. So I really started getting a good sense of, okay, if you're going to after party, you need to wear this. If you're going to, a business meeting, you need to wear this. If you're going to a social setting, you need to wear this. Because I was doing it. I was doing it in college. So I might have like 3 or 4 outfit changes in one day. And for me, it was my scientific process, right? I was measuring the data, I was evaluating, and I was gathering the feedback. And that's kind of what really started getting me, really good at kind of styling and also learning the importance of context when it comes to dressing, because you can do the right thing at the wrong time. So that was kind of my process of really kind of, evolving into where I'm at now, that, later led to me, like I said, working at the same retailer where I met my mentor. And that was, junior year. So, imagine, junior year, I'm working full time. I would have to drive from Statesboro, Georgia, Thursday night to get to Atlanta Friday, and I would work 10-hour shifts. Then I would leave Atlanta Sunday night, get back in Statesboro around 1 or 2, have to do all my homework and repeat the process. And Statesboro is about 4 or 5 hours away from Atlanta. So I was doing that every week. And it was tough, it was grueling, but it was worth it because, I graduate college, and it was a weird space because I was like, man, do I want to go to medical device sales? Do I want to go into pharmaceutical sales? I had higher paying jobs at the time that I could transition to, but my mindset was 2 things. Number one, let me try this out for 2 or 3 years because I like it. And if it doesn't go well, I always can go back to that. And number 2, at the end of the day, when you're in the service space, especially when you're in the luxury service space, the type of clientele you have will be able to give you access to jobs. So you'll as long as you give good service, you're interacting with the type of people who can give you a 6-figure job like that. So I always knew that at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, I'll still be fine. So I made that transition to, stick with it. And, it went really well. I became one of the top salesmen in the world at my company. Did that for a few years. And it just got to the space to where I felt like, man, I think I can start doing this from my own.
Yeah, most definitely. So what were some initial struggles that you felt like you had to overcome to like really keep yourself pushing and go forward and keep building your brand and business?
Well, here's one thing I tell people, man, with entrepreneurship, it's 2 things. Number one is it can feel extremely lonely at times, extremely lonely. And you have to be willing to accept the emotional fitness that comes with entrepreneurship. And that's something that I don't think people talk about enough. We talk about mental fitness, we talk about, physical fitness, but what does emotional fitness look like? And a lot of times you don't realize the distance between who we are now and the person we have to become to even manage the type of goals that we want. Like everybody wants to make $1 million, but emotionally they don't think about what it takes to manage that much money, to have people on payroll, to have families depending on you. And if you don't work, somebody might not be able to eat or pay rent if you don't show up. So emotionally, that's a lot. And what I realized is, entrepreneurship, I was thinking that, I had a 6-pack, I was in shape. And what I realized in this journey is, man, I was obese. I had to shave some pounds off to even be able to emotionally manage, having the consistency and the discipline to show up every day, even when, you don't want to do it. Because that's the thing. Sometimes people think that you're always going to feel motivated and you don't. But because motivation at the end of the day is a byproduct of action. You get motivated the more that you act, but it doesn't always start off that way. And that I think was really a struggle for me, because, and this is the second thing, a lot of people think that, you work harder when you're an entrepreneur. And from my perspective, it's not necessarily that you work harder, but you have to be more disciplined. And that is the hard thing, because nobody's going to tell you to get up. Nobody's going to give you the structure. And that is, I think, if anything, the more taxing part, because I was working way harder when I was working for somebody else. 12-hour days, I was on my feet all day. I didn't have lunch. I mean, these were very hard days where now, in 2, 3 hours, I can make what I may have made, in 20 hours or 25 hours. You know what I mean? So it's not that the work is harder, but it's more discipline. It's more focus, and it requires you to have a level of consistency about yourself where every day you have to implement the structure. And that is the true battle. It's the battle with yourself that I think is most difficult.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. And I can attest to that myself. Like it is hard when you're taking this entrepreneurship route. Like you have to say no to a lot of things that a lot of other people are doing because you know that you have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning the next day, or you just may have some work that you have to catch up on. So it can be very lonely. That's something that I'm, going through myself right now. So during those times and those moments, what were some things that you did to yourself or said to yourself that kind of helped you to keep on going, motivate you to keep on going?
I think it's my routine, man. So every day when I wake up, I have a couple of different things that I do. The first thing I do is I listen to some type of motivation, 30 minutes a day, whether it's like Tony Robbins, Les Brown, Jim Rohn, whoever it may be. But I'm very anal about what I'm pouring in to my mind, the garden of my mind, right? Because it's very easy, especially when you don't feel like, doing it, don't feel like getting up, or you're feeling lonely, for that thought, to sprout, and to turn into a weed. And as we all know, weeds are really hard to get out. So the way that you kind of manage that is you have to be very intentional about what you're intaking every single day, especially when you wake up. So for me, I always have to listen to something positive, especially in my first 30 minutes. The second thing that I do when I wake up, of course, I do 50 push-ups, get my blood flowing. Third thing that I do is I have a list of confessions that I say every single day and at night. And the reason I think the confessions are so important is because as humans, we have, and Tony Robbins says this a lot, as human beings, we have the need to perform consistently with the way that we view ourselves. And the confessions are important is because it inputs that meaning to who you associate yourself with, right? So when you're saying certain things like I'm an entrepreneur, I'm dedicated, I'm confident, I'm consistent. When you're saying these I am statements, you begin to identify with them, and you have to perform consistently with the way that you identify yourself. So those, I think, routines and those habits really got me through those rough patches, because at the end of the day, even though you might have that little voice that's telling you to stop, or man, you don't feel like doing that, there's something inside of you, and a belief that kind of rises up inside of you that kind of squashes those little voices down, even though that sometimes they're there. And sometimes they don't always go away, but again, it's learning to manage the activity to manage that, right? Before it becomes, a weed,
Mhm.
right? Sometimes you got to get the spray it out, and make sure that isn't growing to something that's troublesome.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. Because, like you're saying, man, if you don't get those weeds out now, those weeds will grow and grow and grow and take over your whole brain, your whole mindset. So that's powerful. So just to kind of cap off this whole interview, man, what's one thing that if you had to go back in time and tell your younger self to make yourself stronger, what's the one thing you think you would tell yourself?
I would tell myself that. That's a good question, man. I will probably tell myself not to be so not to be so involved into what everybody thinks about you, because there's a point in time to where I think, especially for me, I think younger, I would care to a certain degree a lot about what other people thought about me. And it's not to say that it doesn't matter, because life gives you feedback, and it is important that you listen to feedback sometimes to self-evaluate. But I think I was in this space to where I would get really affected when people wouldn't like me, or would think something about me where I knew, from my heart wasn't true. But what I've realized is sometimes in life, there's going to be people that no matter what you do, they won't like you. And when you have, a certain energy to yourself, and when you have, ambition to yourself or a certain light, to people that are used to the darkness, it's always going to be uncomfortable. They're always going to get sunburned. They're never going to like you when they're around you. And you have to become comfortable and okay with that, and to do anything meaningful or impactful, you're always going to have people that are going to be detractors or people that um, don't like you. And it's being comfortable and okay with that, because, you can try to minimize yourself, but no one that's great will do anything great by minimizing themselves. You have to be willing to maximize yourself and be okay with making others uncomfortable in the process. And that's something that I think if I was younger, I would tell myself, because I think I found myself trying to minimize myself a lot to make other people or to make other people comfortable. And at the end of the day, in the process of me doing that, I minimized myself and I think damaged a little bit of my growth trying to do that. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you put a fish in a tank, right? It only can grow so much to where its environment is, right? But why are you placing yourself in a tank when you're meant for the ocean? So, it's kind of having that mindset, man, I think was really big for me.
Wow.
That's what I would tell myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, man. I relate to that. I really do. And I once again, I wanted to say thank you for coming on to the interview, because, as much as this is going to help other people out there, I was able to learn a lot for myself as well too. So, Joseph, where can everybody find you at?
Man, so you can find me on Instagram at Mr.J Hines. And if you want to follow the brand, it's going to be Affluent X Life on Instagram. Again, it's Affluent X Life. Also, if you want to check out the website, it's going to be www.affluentxlife.com. My man, I really appreciate your time as well. This was a great interview, and I really appreciate you reaching out, man.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Well, everyone, you have it there. Joseph, I appreciate you coming on, and we'll do this again some other time. All right.
Absolutely, man.